Hi there, my name's Elizabeth Pym. I teach for ISD 279, District 279, and I am here today to show you how to sew a face mask or a face covering for your brass player. This could be a trumpet, a baritone, a tuba. The face mask will end up looking like a regular accordion style mask with ear flaps, and you'll put it over your face like this. It'll have a nose wire, but the fancy thing is right here in the center. There's a little piece of velcro so you can open it up and slide your mouthpiece in and out, and then close it right back up. So this is the face mask we will be sewing. You will need, the supplies you will need to make this face mask are 3 inches of velcro, 26 inches of elastic for the ears. You will also need about a 1/4 yard of muslin. You really need 7.5 inches for an average sized mask, although you may need 8.5 if you've got an extra large sized face. You will need the same amount of a fashion fabric. Any quilting cotton fabric will work, and you can use the same fabric on the front and the back. However, it's also hard then to tell which is the front and which is the back. So 2 different fabrics are best, and muslin's cheap. So you will also need a nose piece. For your nose piece, you could use twist ties or a coffee twisty thing from the coffee bag. You could use that, but you will need a nose piece. All right, I have my fashion fabric here, and I have my muslin. Since I have a rotary cutter, I'm going to stack my fabrics, but if you don't have a rotary cutter, you're more than welcome to cut these with the scissors, or you can even rip cotton if you like ripping fabric instead. So I'm going to line my 2 fabrics up, line my ruler up on the 2 fabrics, and then I'm going to slice off my selvage edge. Once I get my selvage edge off, I'm going to turn my fabric, and I am going to cut 2 4.5 by 7.5 inch pieces. So this direction it's 7.5, so I need to get this direction to be 4.5. There's one piece. And 2 pieces at 4.5 inches. And there are the 2 pieces of fabric I need. Now that you have your mask pieces cut out, you also need to cut out pieces for some bias tape or some binding along the edge of your mask. What you're going to do is you're going to take your fashion fabric and you're going to fold it over to get a triangle. See the triangle there? Then you're going to turn that so it's straight on your cutting board, just like so. Line up your ruler and get as close to the edge of that as you can and cut the fold off. Once you have your fold removed, find your 2-inch mark on your ruler. Right there is my 2-inch mark right there on my ruler. Line that up with your fabric and give that a cut. And that will give you 2 pieces of bias binding. If you don't have a rotary cutter and rotary table, the other thing you can do is, I'll go on the other end of my fabric. Once again, make your triangle, and you can mark that with a pencil, that fold with the pencil. And then you can take your ruler and mark 2 inches for a couple of strips, and then take your scissors and cut those apart. That will give you the same effect without the rotary cutter. So let's take our 2 bias strips and let's go back to the ironing board. So to make bias tape out of your bias strip, you're going to put it right sides down to your ironing board, and you're going to fold in about 1/4 inch just to meet the two ends directly in the center of your strip. Take your iron and just guide your iron along, making those two sides even as you can, all the way to the end of your strip. Give it a good solid press. Oops, I messed that up a little, didn't I? Let's try that bottom part again. There we go. And that's how you make a bias strip. I'm going to do the other one. I'll meet you back here in just a minute. Now that I have my 2 pieces of fabric cut, actually it's 4 pieces, I'm going to put the muslin against the right side of my fashion fabric. Right there. So they're lined up like that, and I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. 1/4 inch seam allowance right on the 7-inch side, 7.5 inch side. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Lining that up on my machine with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then, to make it easier for you and keep from wasting thread, you don't have to stop and cut your threads. Get that first piece just out of the feed dogs, and you can line up your second piece and feed it right straight in behind it. Once you get that done, I'm going to grab my scissors, and I'm going to cut the first piece off. Also cut off the tail strings there. Flip this one around and do the other 7-inch piece, 7.5 inch piece. Out of the feed dogs, and on with the next piece. Cut your threads. And it's off to the ironing board. Now that I have the top and bottom of the square sewn, the sides are still open. We're going to turn it out right side out now. Both squares are rectangles. These are actually rectangles, aren't they? Both rectangles get turned right sides out. And you're going to find your seam here. Sometimes it's easiest if you press your seam just flat a little bit, and then it's easier to find your seam after that. I'm going to do that side too. Just a little press there. But the idea is to get your fashion fabric all on one side and your muslin all on the other with a nice crisp edge. So there we go, nice crisp edge, and down goes the iron. Give that a good iron. Now we're going to do that to the other piece. All right, you're going to pick up one of the pieces and head back to the sewing machine. Back at the sewing machine, you're going to take your 2 panels and you're going to top stitch right along the very edge of your panel just to hold it nice and neatly in place. So get it all lined up and just line up the edge of your fabric with your presser foot there and a nice close top stitch right on the edge there. Do your first panel, and just like we did before, slide your second panel right on in, right behind the first one. Once again, cut off the first panel, cut off your tails, turn your panel around, and top stitch the other side of it. One more to go. Cut the one off again, top stitch the other side. clip your threads, clip the 2 panels apart. Now that you've got a top stitched, you need to find your nose piece. Pull the sticky backing off of your nose piece, or get your twist tie or whatever it is you're using for your mask. And it's easiest if you do this with the muslin side up, and you're going to want to stick it underneath the muslin between the 2 fabrics, right up there at the top of one of the 2 panels. So I'm going to slide it in and do my best to find the center of the panel and get it up at the top all the way across. And there it is, right in there. It looks centered. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around the nose piece with my machine. Make sure you don't hit the nose piece with your needle. If you do, you will break your needle. So you want to be careful not to hit your nose piece. And I gave it a little bit of a back stitch there just to secure my stitches. There we go. Usually I line up this edge of my presser foot right in the center of the nose piece, and that helps guide it along just a little bit. Give me a little back stitch. And then you can clip your threads here and clip your tails here. Next thing we'll be doing is moving on to the Velcro. So, I have my 3-inch piece of Velcro. I really only need half of this, but I want to cut it in half the long way, this way, okay? So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to carefully slice it in half right down the center. I can save this piece for another mask. This piece is going to go on this mask. I'm going to take it apart. And I'm going to take the soft side. This is the piece with the nose piece in it that I just put in there. You can see it in there. You can feel it in there. The soft side piece is going to go down at the bottom on the piece of muslin. Just a little bit from the edge, right about there. And we are going to stitch that piece of Velcro down nice and secure. Clip my threads, and then I'm going to go on to the other piece. Get my threads out of here. So that's the top piece. This will be the bottom piece. So the bottom piece, we're going to want to attach the scratchy side of your Velcro to the fashion fabric side. So about in the center, right about there, that's where you're going to want to attach it. See, I lined it up with the piece on the top there, so you can see where it's going to go. Fashion fabric with the scratchy side of the Velcro there. So one more time, under my machine. And clip my threads. Now that your Velcro is secured on your mask, put the 2 Velcro sections together. And we are going to want to sew in 1.5 inches right to there. So I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to mark where 1.5 inches is. Right there, so I know where my sew line is. And I'll do the same on the other side. Look and make sure things are even. And if it looks even, you can top stitch down, top stitch the 2 layers together up to that 1.5 inch mark. So here we go. Right up to my pin, turn my fabric, go a couple stitches, and down the other side. Clip my threads, do the same thing to the other side. clip your threads. The next thing you're going to do is to put pleats in your mask. So you're going to start at the top and you're going to make one and go ahead and pin them into place. 2, right over the top of that velcro is where that one's going to go. And 3 pleats. And you can hear my cat. He says meow. Now that you have your pleats pinned into your mask, you're going to baste them into place on the mask. So get the mask under the presser foot and try to go less than 1/2 inch, okay? More kind of towards 1/4 inch there. Probably about 1/4 inch is good. And you're just going to baste those pleats down so that they don't move on you. So one pin out at a time. And I usually use the pin to help myself guide the next pleat in place. So I'm going to pull that pin out and I'm going to put it right at the top of that pleat to help guide it into place. One more on this side. Take it out. This time I do have to cut it. You can cut off your tail too. Flip it over and you can do the other side. Next, you're going to get those bias strips that we made at the beginning. See your bias strip? And you're going to cut off that triangular part at the top, because if you started sewing here, you wouldn't have enough fabric. So we're going to cut it down where the strip will then be square all the way across. See how that's square all the way across now? So we're going to take that, and I usually like to start on the right side of the fabric. And I open up the one side of the tape and line it up with the edge of my mask. And you see how I've got that hanging over the mask just a little bit? I'm going to fold that back over. So just give it a fold over so it's now even with the edge of the mask, but it's folded onto the wrong side. Slide that under my sewing machine. And this time you can pretty much sew right along your ironing mark on your bias tape. So that little iron mark right along there, you can sew right along it. After you get your tape started, go ahead and clip the other side just a little bit longer than the mask. See, just a little bit longer than the mask. And then fold that back underneath as well. Right there. And continue on down. Remove the mask. Next, you're going to need to go find your elastic. So, your 26-inch piece of elastic, take it and cut it in half with your scissors. Take one side, line up your ends, and tie a knot at the end of the elastic. Just like so. Knot. These are now your 2 ear elastics. Now, on your mask, that bias tape, you're going to fold it the opposite direction now. Fold it so that the right sides are all on the outside. And you're going to work from the wrong side of the mask. Take your elastic and line it up with the edge of the mask and fold your bias tape over the top. And you're welcome to pin this in place if you'd like. If you feel confident though, you don't need to. Make sure you feel the edge of your elastic away from your seam. You don't want to sew over the top of your elastic. If you sew over your elastic, you're not going to be able to move it. So you want to avoid sewing over your elastic. I'm going to use my bodkin to help guide this piece through my machine and to ensure that I'm not sewing over my elastic there. You could also use a seam ripper or a pin, just something to kind of help hold the edge of that fabric down as you go and make sure that the elastic's out of the way. So here we go. And I'm going to get the other end of it all set up. Tuck my ends in, make sure my elastic is free. See, I can feel and see my elastic on the other side of my bodkin there, so I know I'm safe. And just top stitch right down the edge of that piece of bias tape. And the magic of cutting that on the bias like that makes it so that the fabric, the bias tape, will stretch as you're sewing it. So if you miss a little bit or it's not perfectly lined up, it's got a little bit of stretch and give from the fabric, and you can adjust it as needed. So we're going to repeat the process on the other side. And there we are. Clip your threads. And voila! You have a completed mask. Now, these elastics you can retie to be the correct size for your student. So it's the correct size, and then voila! You've got a spot for your mouthpiece. Yay! So there you go. There's a trumpet mask.